Hello, Black Eagles. Welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast YouTube channel. As always, we will be previewing our upcoming European game, and we are drawn against Danish side FC Midtjylland in the UEFA Europa League second qualifying round. And obviously, as we know, last season that's how far as we got because Shakhtar Donetsk knocked us out. And my guest here to talk to us about FC Midtjylland, to tell us a little bit more about the team and whether we should fear a similar fate again this season, is Nicklas Degn, Danish football journalist. Nicklas, thank you very much for joining us and making the time to come and speak to us.
Thank you for letting me.
And Nicklas, this is a tough one, I think, for Beşiktaş, because I've seen a lot of reactions online from Besiktas fans, and I have to say there's a great deal of respect for FC Midtjylland. A lot of people didn't like the draw, weren't happy with the draw, and are kind of fearful that this may go the wrong way again, like last season. I would even say some people are putting Midtjylland even on a similar pedestal as Shakhtar last season. And that's saying a lot, I would say. So how was the reaction in Denmark when the draw happened, and how is the general public seeing the chances of Midtjylland?
It's the perception in Denmark is actually quite the same as in Beşiktaş, because FC Midtjylland could have drawn easier opponents. They could have drawn tougher opponents, but not many tougher opponents. So Beşiktaş is pursued as one of the toughest draws they could have. So in that regards, they're not quite satisfied, the FC Midtjylland fans, but still they have quite confidence going into both the season and this two legs against Beşiktaş, because FC Midtjylland is a team that has been building on, and they weren't satisfied with the last season in the Danish league, where they didn't win the championship, but they did quite well in the European campaign. So they come into this season with a lot of hope, a lot of ambition. They have to win the championship and have to show something in Europe too, but with this confidence in mind, they thought that they could get away with an easier opponent than Beşiktaş. So there's also quite some respect for coming into this leg in Denmark.
Mm-hmm. And of course, one of those important key figures in the last couple of seasons, but especially last season, Player of the Year in Denmark was Aral Şimşir, and he's apparently on the verge of signing for Trabzonspor. So how big of a loss will that be for the tie against Beşiktaş if Aral Şimşir does depart before the two games against Beşiktaş?
Well, it is obviously quite a big. I wouldn't maybe I would say concern, but it's quite a big loss for FC Midtjylland, especially for these two legs, because yes, he was the best player last season. He might not be the best player. That might be Francolino Joe. Mm-hmm. But Francolino had injuries for most of last season and didn't come into the spring in quite as big of quite as good of a form as you could expect. So in this regard, from when you look at the strengths of a player and when you look at how they performed, Şimşir was the best player at FC Midtjylland last season. So of course, with this in regard, it is a big loss, also because at this moment in time, FC Midtjylland have done a couple of big things on the transfer market, but not something that would make up for the loss of Şimşir on one of the flanks. So I think right now, what I hear is that it does make the FC Midtjylland fans a little worried, because it probably will go through the transfer very soon, so that he won't be able to play one of the legs. And Francolino, while mentioning him, he would probably also be sold in this transfer window. But right now it looks like he will be coming into form, or FC Midtjylland hopes he will be coming into form this next month, and maybe he will take the 2 legs against Beşiktaş with him, so that potential suitors would look at him and say, okay, now he's into form again, and maybe buy him for a bigger sum. But Al Simsier seems to be gone very soon. He is on their training camp right now, but seems like he will travel to Trabzon and be there quite soon. So they will, with 90% chance, be without him in these 2 legs, and it is a big loss. And especially if they won't be making any transfers that would make up for him these, next 16 days.
Yeah. Of course, Midtjylland are known for their extensive data scouting and analytic recruitment style, something that we've also seen in recent years in the Premier League. I believe Brentford are a big leading club in that as well. But Midtjylland have, over the years, had a tremendous amount of success with that. Paul Onuachu, who plays in the Belgian league, is an example of that. I think, didn't Arokodare come from Midtjylland as well? I think he plays in the Premier League now, or Wolves. I think he might have come through there as well.
Doesn't ring a bell for me too.
Yeah, maybe not. But Onuachu definitely did.
Yes, he did.
And that's maybe one of their biggest strengths. Yes, they might be losing Aral Şimşir here, but maybe another hidden gem will be standing up in his absence, right? And you mentioned Francolino, that's somebody Beşiktaş fans might remember. Beşiktaş were interested in him last summer, and I think he got injured around that time, maybe. Did he indeed? Yes. I think he had a knee injury or something along those lines. But some familiar faces, some familiar names in that squad as well. South Korean international Cho and Lee, both in there as well. We saw them at the World Cup, of course, only recently. And we always like to talk about how a club gets to the stage in Europe. And of course, Midtjylland, you mentioned already, didn't manage to win the Danish Superliga last season. I think they finished second, but they did, if I'm not mistaken, win the Danish Cup, right?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, so a decent amount of success. And who, refresh my memory, who won the league again in Denmark? Because I know it wasn't FC Copenhagen, because they finished quite low in the standings, I saw. But I think, I don't remember who actually won it.
AGF from Aarhus, the second biggest town in Denmark, won, and that was the big story in Denmark because it was first time in 40 years they won. Yeah.
Okay.
AGF.
Yeah. So that's probably a disappointment for Midtjylland, but they are coming into the season strong. I did see that they started their preparations a little bit sooner than Beşiktaş did already. They had their first friendly on the 20th of June already, and I have to be honest, to me that was kind of like, oof, that's... Turkish clubs have this reputation of never really being ready early in the season, especially for these early qualifiers. And seeing Midtjylland already playing 2-3 friendlies before we played our first one kind of had me a little nervous. How is Midtjylland's preparation looking for the Beşiktaş games in the preseason so far?
Right now, it seems very into as planned. I haven't actually looked quite that much because that's also something that FC Midtjylland and the other biggest Danish teams, to be fair, always try to play down the results in the training matches. But the communication from FC Midtjylland been that they've been getting at it quite good, and everything is going to plan, and everything is also very strategically planned in a club as FC Midtjylland. As you mentioned yourself, they are very big on scouting and data, and they had the owner for quite some years, or the co-owner of the club were Matthew Benham, who also co-owned, or actually majority owned, Brentford. So that comparison to Brentford holds stake right now. Benham, I think it was 2 years ago, sold his shares in FC Midtjylland, and Denmark's richest person, Anders Holt Poulsen, who also owned quite much land in, I think it's Scotland, bought the club, and he has continued much of this. That has been a component for success for FC Midtjylland. So even though Benham isn't at the club anymore, this scouting and data and very strategically fundamental club is still what this club is running on. So everything seems to be going into plans. They had, looking from the outside, a fine season last season, but FC Midtjylland doesn't think that themselves. They have very big ambitions, and they are at an important moment in their history right now, where they can look to FC Copenhagen, who has been the biggest club over the last 25 years in Denmark, who has been battling for the first in the noughties and the tens, been battling for the position of the biggest club in Denmark with Brøndby, who some people might seem as a recognizable club. And then FC Midtjylland came up in the tens and took over Brøndby's role. And now FC Midtjylland are at this point in time, for the first time in their history, they were founded in 1999, where they can potentially take over from FC Copenhagen and have that stamp as the biggest Danish club for not just 1 year, 2 year, but for an era of time. Yeah. So that's just to say they had a fine season, won the cup, was second, had maybe the most successful season in Europe until now, where they only went out on the penalties to Nottingham Forest in the Europa League. But this is still not something that makes FC Midtjylland satisfied with where they are as a club in their development at this point in time. So everything seems to be going into plans, but that's also just to mention what it is, what kind of ambitions or what self-perception FC Midtjylland are going into this season with, and into the Besiktas 2 legs as their first. That's the first assignment. What they're going into that with. So there's a lot of pressure on FC Midtjylland right now, when you take into consideration that it is only July and the season. I think the season starts on. I think the first match is after the Besiktas match. The Danish league starts pretty early always, but I think still that the Besiktas match is before the first in the Danish.
They have one more friendly, I think, and then it's a Beşiktaş game already. So
after 3 days after the first match against Besiktas, the league will start. So they are very early in the preparations, but there's already a lot of pressure on FC Midtjylland right now.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about the coach, Mike Tullberg, and the playing style that he has Midtjylland playing? What type of football, what brand of football do the team like to play?
He is a very exciting character, but also a very dividing character. He is exceptionally powerful, but also colorful on the sidelines. He really lives into the moment, and maybe sometimes too much. So if you haven't seen Mike Tullberg coach a match before, I think you will definitely notice him during these 2 matches. He is very active on the sidelines, and sometimes some people in Denmark, some fans in Denmark thinks it's too much. Others think that it's just the perfect amount of how he lives into the matches. But he is quite new in the Danish league as a manager. He were appointed in September for FC Midtjylland, but had a very high regards. Was seen as one of the biggest coaching talents in Denmark from what he achieved at Borussia Dortmund, where he was where he started in, I think it was 2019 or 2020, and built his way up from the academy and the youth system, and also had 3 matches as caretaker manager for the first team for Borussia Dortmund in the Bundesliga, which is quite a big feat for a Danish coach to have, especially so as a Danish coach as young as he is. He's only 40 years old. So he's been a lot of experts and people in Danish football has looked to him as a future big coach in Denmark, and it was seen as his first big role when he was appointed in September. So just to say that there's also a lot of pressure on him and a lot of ambition for this club, which is as at his shoulders, and it has been. I wouldn't say a roller coaster first 10 months of it's more than that. What will it be? It will be 10 about 10 months that he's been in charge of this club. Of course, as we were into, he has won a cup and done okay in the league, but he's also known as someone who really sets these ambitions very high for both him and for the club. So I think a lot of people in Denmark are also looking at this this era or what this could be with Tullberg as the main man in FC Midtjylland, as something that could either go wrong or could go very wrong or could go very well, and the jury is still out as to whether which way it will go. But as to which kind of football he likes, you have to actually just go to look to what he came from when he were appointed in FC Midtjylland, meaning Borussia Dortmund. I wouldn't go as stereotypically as saying that he has this Jürgen Klopp branded football of heavy metal football, but it isn't also very wrong. If you take some of the key elements of Jürgen Klopp's former Borussia Dortmund, if you take some Red Bull inspired aspects and put into it, this is the kind of football you would expect to see from this FC Midtjylland side. Very attacking, very offensive, very some gegenpressing, but also a very high press. But overall, I think the word I would put on this would be power. A lot of power, and this also, of course, demands a lot from the players. So this also means that FC Midtjylland has to sign a very specific type of players that could fit into this kind of football, and they have managed that. The latest transfer is also one of the most significant transfers in the Danish league for not just this year or last year, for maybe the last 10 or 20 years. That is Rasmus Nissen Christensen, which has been transferred in from Eintracht Frankfurt, has also been at Leeds. He has been at Roma and is a academy prospect originally from FC Midtjylland. So he kind of came home. Nobody expected that he would come home so soon. He's also only 28 years old, and he's still I think you still call him a national team player for Denmark on the right wing back. So this is seen as a very, very big feat for FC Midtjylland, and he fits this style perfectly. He fits, of course, the club perfectly because he comes from the club. He knows the mentality. He knows the ambitions. He knows what would be demanded from him, but also Rich role as a culture bearer or one of the most more experienced players that he will have. But also he knows what Tullberg would demand from him, and also what Tullberg would demand that Rasmus Nissen Christensen demands from his teammates. So this is actually maybe the player, Rasmus Nissen Christensen, that Beşiktaş should be looking at as the newest addition that really says something about this FC Midtjylland team anno 2026, 2027. So you can just actually, if you want to look at what brand of football FC Midtjylland plays, just find Rasmus Nissen Christensen, his highlight reel on YouTube, and you will get quite the idea.
Okay, and what would you say are the main strengths of the team and the main weaknesses? For example, you mentioned power. The way I interpret that is energy, determination, grinta. Or do you also mean maybe the old-fashioned, maybe this is a bit more Norwegian than it's Danish, but power play, height, strength, being able to pump the ball into the box and overload the box? When I look at Midtjylland, I think it's probably more of a technical side. or how would you say how accurate that assumption of mine is, and is that, for example, a strength of theirs, that they're strong in the air?
Yeah, they are very strong in the air. And the physical side is exceptional. They won't ever, and that's no matter which team in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I can't come up with a team in Europe that where they will be undermined on the physical side, the very physical side. But also what I mean when I say use this word power is. They will run at you, and they will run and run and run for 90 minutes plus extra time and added time, and you can come up with everything. This side will run until the match is done, and will run at you, and they will press high, and they will sort of be at you, even though, and that's the strength of FC Midtjylland, even though some of their key players might be not hitting the best form on the particular day, they will still come at you with something. So I don't see FC Midtjylland having these days where these really off days. They never really have that. They can hurt anybody on any particular day. But also they are strong defensively. But in the counter attacks, there's something to be gotten at here. They can be vulnerable on counterattacks, and also maybe be vulnerable towards or against sides that has a lot of speed in them, both on the flanks. Not as much because that they have slow wingbacks, but because the wingbacks press so high that there's room behind them that the opponent can benefit from. So I would probably point to that as a key, both strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the first leg on the 23rd of July will be played in Istanbul. Is that seen as an advantage that they get to go away first? And how are they anticipating that game? That obviously in Europe, it's always seen that games away in Istanbul against the big clubs there is a tough order. But how is that viewed in Denmark and by FC Midtjylland?
This is a general perception, and that's no matter who the opponent is, but in two-legged matches in Europe, that the most positive thing to come out of this is to start at the away end, so that you can sit down and look at what pressure are they coming with, and what is it that we have to deal with, and maybe try, if the pressure is high, try to come out of in this case Turkey with a decent result, a 0-0 or 1-1 or something, and then that you still have the home advantage to exit on as the last point of return. But other than that, which is just a general assessment, that it is best to have the second match at home. There's a lot of focus, of course, and that's the same focus every time a Danish club draws a Turkish club in Europe, that it is a very hostile environment, a very tough environment for a Danish club to visit a Turkish club, and especially one of the big three, because there is a lot of respect for the Turkish fan scene. There's a lot of fascination in Denmark towards the Turkish fandom with the three biggest clubs. So everyone in Denmark, of course, knows what an atmosphere there will be in Istanbul, and they have a lot of respect for that. But it is something there's a lot of focus on, and that is seen as Beşiktaş's biggest advantage, from a standpoint that not many people in Denmark knows a lot about Beşiktaş. Yes, they know a lot about the club and the fans, but they doesn't necessarily know a lot about Beşiktaş anno 2026. So especially this thing, the first thing that FC Midtjylland will meet the Beşiktaş fans in the arena, is something that there already is a lot of focus on in the Danish media, and what I figure in the FC Midtjylland team, in Mike Tullberg's motivational speeches. So they have played big matches and big atmospheres before. FC Midtjylland might be a little surprised at exactly how loud it can get in Istanbul, but they will also be prepared for it in those circumstances, that they can prepare for that.
Yeah. Okay. I have another question regarding that. It actually really ties into that a little bit. But before we get to that, I did want to ask you if you could highlight maybe a couple more players. You already highlighted Francolino, of course, and Christensen, the new arrival. Of course, we talked a little bit about Aral. But who else should Beşiktaş be looking out for in the Midtjylland squad? Who are potential players that could hurt them?
I would mention Mikel Gorgosa, not because he's the biggest stars, but because it is him right now, unless they might be making a big transfer in the coming days. But if they don't do that, it will be Mikel Gorgosa that they will be looking to as the Al Simsia replacement. So Mikel Gorgosa has been getting more and more playing time the last couple of seasons. He is pursued as a very big talent. He's Danish, he's 19 years old, and is, not the same type, but can play the exact same position as Al Simsia. But he isn't the finished product. He is perceived as someone who will be, if they don't decide to make another big transfer on this position, is someone who will be looked at now. We have prepared you for quite some seasons. Now it's your time to shine. Arl is gone, so now this position is yours. But he has to lean into this position, and no one expects him to excel from the very first get-go. So that's actually quite positive for Besiktas, that they're not meeting a FC Midtjylland side with Mikel Gorgosa in October, November, or March, but that they're meeting it in July, where he is still new to his position. But other than that, from looking at just who is the best players, who is the most important players, I can't go around Philip Billing, who is also a Danish national team player, who is suffering from, as I understand it, an injury right now. I have a little difficulty as to getting to the bottom of how serious that injury is, whether or not he's just not training on full strength in the preparations already now in the training camp, or if this is actually something that would hold him out of the matches against Besiktas. But just mentioning that he is I think I'll say he's the best player or the most important player, because last season or last year he was that big transfer that I almost to the exact same words I used to describe Rasmus Nissen Christensen. That was the big transfer that FC Midtjylland managed to land last year. He is a big Danish profile. He is a Danish national team player, or just in the periphery of the Danish national team. I think he actually scored the goal for Napoli, where he was loaned out, that secured their championship 2 years ago. So of course he's played a lot of matches in the Premier League for primarily Bournemouth. He is a very versatile player who can play the number 8, the number 6. Also, that's not where his core strength is, but if FC Midtjylland needs it, he can also play as a number 10. Just a very all-round, almost complete midfield player. Also has a lot of physique, is very extremely difficult to get the ball from, extremely good in the air. Also just a very, very good player that were seen as a big feat for FC Midtjylland to land last year, and that has just played exactly what as FC Midtjylland I hope he would, played as to the strength that he thought that they thought that he could bring him. So everyone looked at that transfer last year and said, this is going to be the most important player for FC Midtjylland in the next couple of years going forward, and that is exactly what has happened. So someone might look at this roster and point to him as the person or the player that they know from him playing in the Premier League for quite some years, and that is understandable because he is the best player. And if I should just mention a couple of other names, there's just a very good midfield that is so strong on the ball. A lot of depth in midfield, from it being Daniel Castillo, who were at the World Cup with Ecuador. I don't know if he actually got any playing time, but also Dani Silva and Pedro Bravo, who is from Portugal and Colombia, respectively. They have this very strong midfield who's just extremely good on the ball. Not many will know these names that I just mentioned, but Beşiktaş shouldn't sleep on them because they have shown also in the Europa League against Nottingham Forest that they can perform not in the Danish league but also in Europe. So it is quite a complete squad, but what I also mentioned from a Danish standpoint, of course, this is a great Danish team, but of course it isn't a team that you would expect be a favorite against a Premier League side or something like that, and that is also why they ended with going out in the Europa League against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, but on penalties, like you mentioned, so it's and obviously we can't compare the Premier League budgets to Danish clubs' budgets or even Turkish clubs. To nobody really, right? Other than the very few elite European clubs that are outside the Premier League that can match those budgets. But yeah, it's insane that Midtjylland were even able to push them to the limit and get them to the penalties, which also says a lot about their strength, and I think also strengthens the belief of a lot of Beşiktaş fans that this is going to be an extremely tough matchup. So how you already spoke about the ambition of Midtjylland and of the club and maybe also of the supporters, but obviously, look, Beşiktaş are, like you said, a tough draw, maybe not the toughest, but certainly not the easiest either, at least not on paper. How is it looked at this tie? Is it a must-win for them? Is Europa League stage an absolute must for them, or are they also happy with potentially going down to the Conference League? Like, for example, for Beşiktaş, obviously, we want to play in the Europa League, but there is this extra little candle or carrot dangled in front of us that the Conference League final is being played in our stadium. So it would not be the end of the world if they end up in the Conference League. Of course, we want to go past Midtjylland because if we can get to the next round, that means, that's one less. That's another extra chance you can afford to mess up in the next round or whatever. Whereas last season we found out the hard way. If you mess up in the qualifiers in the Conference League, there's no Europe for you. So how's that seen by Midtjylland to get to? Is the Europa League really their top priority, or?
The top priority is that must be winning the Danish league, because they are at a point in their history right now that they can't go 2 seasons without winning the championship. Yeah. But if you ask FC Midtjylland, I would actually guess that they will say that the Europa League and the Danish league is the top priority. They won't get into a discussion whether or not you can sort of differentiate those two things, but of course you can. But it's neck and neck. If it is the Danish league, it's still neck and neck because Europa League is a big priority for them. It wouldn't be a disaster for them going to the Conference League instead, but dropping completely out of Europa competition quite early in the season would be a disaster. That is where they are at their history right now. For quite some years, the big problem for FC Midtjylland, or the big topic of discussion from the other Danish clubs, toward FC Midtjylland, the main topic of criticism towards FC Midtjylland were that they weren't performing in Europe. They managed to win and be competitive in the Superliga, but for quite some years they had trouble cracking that nut that is European qualification. But now they have gotten that. Now they are in group phases of Europe, and that is where they shall be, and where they perceive themselves as being a big club that is in Europe, if not every year, then almost every year. And it should, from not winning the Superliga last year, they have to perform in a way that they both win the Superliga and is in a group phase of Europe this season. And it doesn't have to be Europa League, but it almost has to be. That is quite where they are. So for them, it would be a very, very big disappointment right now going out of this tie. But they also would have said that before the draw, and when they take the draw into consideration, as I said, they pursue this as one of the hardest draws that they could have. The expectations might been lowered a little bit, but the perception is still that it would be. And even though I see this match as over two ties, very 50-50, might even with the slight advantage to Besiktas, they still pursue this as a big disappointment, not going further than here. But everyone in Denmark perceives this as quite a close encounter.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a very similar situation where both clubs maybe would not think it's the end of the world if they would drop down to the Conference League, but they probably prefer to not do that just yet, because obviously if you drop out now, you still have to survive 2 Conference League rounds as well. Whereas if you manage to get past this stage, then your chances of at least getting to the league stages of the Conference League are significantly increased as well. And then finally, Nicklas, we've talked a lot about Midtjylland and about their developments on the transfer market, their coach, all that kind of stuff. But of course, at Beşiktaş, there's been a lot less stability over the last couple of years. There's a lot of change, a lot of new coaches coming and going. How is that viewed now by FC Midtjylland, that Beşiktaş now have appointed a top coach? Vincenzo Italiano played 2 finals in the Conference League with Fiorentina over the last couple of years, did really well at the Fiorentina and Bologna in the Serie A, in Italian football. He has a big reputation in Italy, at least, and I think a decent reputation in Europe as well, due to his efforts with Fiorentina and Bologna as well in the Champions League. How is that viewed, that appointment? Is that something that puts Midtjylland on their toes? And how are they looking towards some of the transfers that Beşiktaş are making right now, with the announcement today of Alexander Nubel, German international goalkeeper who was out on loan the past 2-3 seasons at VfB Stuttgart. Salih Özcan, Turkish international, of course. Kasum Ouattara, who arrived earlier. And then, of course, Leandro Trossard, who might be coming in. But even if he does, let's be honest, he's not going to play against Midtjylland. He's not going to be back on time from the World Cup. Because as we spoke earlier off air, we watched the Belgium against the USA game this night, and obviously they are going through, and they will play again against Spain on Friday. So even if they do end up signing Trossard, there's no chance that he'll be ready for these matches. But still, Turkish clubs love to throw money around, love to spend big, bring in big names, whether it's a coach or players. How is that viewed in the Danish media and by FC Midtjylland and their fans?
It is viewed as something, if I would be a little harsh, as something typically Turkish.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But from the point of view that many in Denmark doesn't know very much about Turkish football. They know little about Galatasaray because it's the team that's won the last couple of championships. They know a little bit about.
And they played against
Fenerbahce,
Copenhagen, of course.
Yeah, of course. In that regards, they actually know a little bit about Beşiktaş here too, because they also played against FC Copenhagen some years ago, and then Fenerbahce, and then Beşiktaş, because Beşiktaş have in my recollection, never played in Denmark or against the Danish team before.
Yeah.
The knowledge about Beşiktaş isn't that great, also because the Turkish league has never been televised in Denmark. There hasn't been a TV deal with Turkish football in Denmark. I know a lot of football fans are very fascinated by. I mean, because many football people in Denmark know that I have a interest and some knowledge about Turkish football, often ask me about Turkish football, but from this fascination point, but not because they know a lot about it, but because they might want to know a lot about it. But this deeper knowledge of Turkish football in Denmark, or a potential deeper knowledge of Turkish football in Denmark, would kind of be, if that should sort of fold out, that has to come with a TV deal, so that the Turkish league can be broadcasted in Denmark, and that doesn't look like something that would happen. Even though we have the biggest five league, the last season we had a TV deal with the Portuguese league, and there's been Scottish league and everything else, but never Turkish league, which I think is a shame. But that is just as to say that when you look at how big Turkish football is and how many knows the reputation that Turkish football has, both on the good and the bad sides, the deeper knowledge isn't that big. So many people in Denmark doesn't know a lot about Beşiktaş. I don't think the knowledge about Beşiktaş at FC Midtjylland before the draw were quite that big either. Of course, they will scout them as much as they can, and then will have a big knowledge when the first match rolls up. But just to say, many people know this, that Turkish clubs like to use a lot of money, but I still think that when with this in regard, when Danish football fans try to read up on Beşiktaş and look at the squad, they will be quite surprised as to not seeing these big name as many big name players with Premier League matches, and them being in the fall of their career and stuff like that. I mean, there's not that many Show Marios right now in Beşiktaş. They were instead they will look to Okan Kucu and say that, all right, that's a transfer that's actually quite impressive from Beşiktaş, which is also of course, and I know that Okan's history with Beşiktaş is a unique example, and that Beşiktaş could lend him in this regard also. But so I don't think many in Denmark or FC Midtjylland for that regard will gain a lot of recognition about the Beşiktaş sides beforehand, but they have a lot of recognition with Vincenzo Italiano, who is I mean, not the broad, so the football fans in Denmark in the broad sense won't know who Vincenzo Italiano is. Those people who just watches 2 Superliga matches and the national team play every month, they won't know who Vincenzo Italiano is. But sort of more nerdy football fans in Denmark really like Vincenzo Italiano, have really noticed what he has done in Italy, and look to him and say, all right, if he chooses a Turkish team, if he chooses, when he, as he's now done, chooses Beşiktaş as his next project, this is actually quite exciting. So the Vincenzo Italiano appointment is actually something that gains a lot of respect from the Danish side. So I wouldn't be surprised if, from all the big names that Beşiktaş also has, that it would be Italiano that will be center of the most attention in the media coverage of Beşiktaş in the Danish media coming up to this match.
And do you see that a little bit as a styles clash almost, maybe, because Italiano and Midtjylland's style sounds very similar? How do you think that's going to turn out?
Yeah, I'm looking. I also this perception of Italiano that I mentioned before isn't just a general perception. That is also my perception of Italiano. I also like him and have followed him very much in the Serie A which is the league I follow the most outside of the Danish league.
You have the podcast, of course, Calcioland, I
yes,
think.
Yes. And so I am so excited to see what Italiano will do with this Besiktas side, and it is exactly as you mentioned, the brand of football would be comparable, and in this regard, I think we have two potentially very open matches and two very exciting matches in store. Of course, we still have to see what Italiano will do with this Besiktas side and with the squad, because we've also seen a little with Bologna in that if he doesn't have the exact squad or the squad rotation that he likes, or if he haven't managed to get the exact players that he wants, because that many transfer money didn't Bologna have. Bologna didn't have that big of a budget, of course, so he couldn't just point out and say, I want this player, this player, this player. So just to say, in Bologna, there was also something that he just had to manage with. And we saw in maybe the last time of his appointment in Bologna that he could be also a pragmatic coach. So we still have to see what Italiano will show up at Besiktas, but just knowing what he often plays, which brand of football he often plays, I think we have some very interesting matches in store. So just all in all, quite of looking at this from the outside perspective, and from knowing, of course, a little about Danish football and Turkish football and a little about Italian football. I am extremely excited about these two legs.
Yeah. You can tell from your words are dripping of excitement. And maybe for us, I think the way I view it, I think it's maybe a little unfortunate that we're facing Midtjylland already now. Maybe if it would have been in the playoff or maybe even in the league stages, I think then of course Italiano will have had a longer time to implement his style. I think it will take a little bit. It'll take a couple of months maybe to really truly get the players to play his brand of football the way he wants to execute it. So my personal opinion is that it's Midtjylland have the advantage in this tie. I think just the fact that they've been working with the same coach for 10 plus months, they already have their automatisms in the team, so to speak. They know what to expect from each other, whereas Beşiktaş is still very much at the beginning of this new project, and hopefully long may it last. But I think that is a definite advantage for Midtjylland. But that's just my personal opinion. Then one final question, Nicklas, something I always like to ask. On the return will be on the 30th of July. And there are, of course, going to be Beşiktaş fans who are going to make the trip. What I always like about European football, especially the Europa League and the Conference League, is that you do get to make these European trips that maybe in the Champions League you'd always, there's a big chance you have to go to England, there's a big chance you have to go to France and all those kind of countries. But what I really like about the Europa League and the Conference League is you get to go to Denmark, Sweden, Czechia, Slovakia sometimes maybe, other countries. We've even had the opportunity to go to Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands and stuff like that in the past couple of years. So when the fans make the trip to Denmark and are in the Midtjylland area, is that what the area is called? I think...
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that you would say they have to do? They have to go and see this, they have to go and eat there. Is there anything like that? Museums maybe? Specialties, local cuisine?
I should weigh my words now, especially if someone from Midtjylland hears this, but I don't think it's wrong to say that the general perception of Herning, where FC Midtjylland are based, the city is called Herning or Ikast, depending on whether you are at the stadium or the training area, isn't perceived as the most exciting city, which is also a bit unfair, I think, because it lays in the middle of the biggest part of Denmark, which is called Jutland, and it's a very like bare area. It's quite along to the sea, so it's known as an area that haven't gotten very big resources, or that has sort of really laid their own ground and have to build something from the way up. They haven't had all the advantages that Copenhagen or Aarhus have gotten. These people in Herning and in FC Midtjylland has to everything they would like to have, and everything that Herning and FC Midtjylland have now, they have built it with their own hands, sort of to say. That is the general story about Midtjylland, and that is also a general story about FC Midtjylland. That they could build this big of a football club in this area is quite impressive, actually. But just as to say, this is not generally perceived as a very exciting town or area to go to, but that could be in the future, because there's really big ambitions, and they regard themselves very highly in Herning for something that we can build something out of nothing. So that might be the attitude you would meet in Herning. From there's no as such local cuisine, but Turkish fans, I actually think, now this is really just me brainstorming or jamming on, but if I don't recall wrong, there is in Herning a couple of Middle Eastern inspired, might even Turkish inspired restaurants that are very good, that they could go to. I can't remember the name right now, actually, but we at an earlier point we had a Danish world champion in backgammon, which is also, of course, a big sport or pastime in Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't recall wrong, he was of Turkish descent. He's Danish, but has Turkish roots. He has a restaurant, might even a brasserie, I think it's called. I think it's in Herning. This is just jamming from the top of my head, but I think it's correct. If they can manage to find that place, that would have very good food. So that's a very specific thing I would mention and recollect. But other than that, I think actually it would be more exciting to start off in Aarhus. If the Turkish fans could make that trip. I don't think it's more than 1 hour and a half from Herning. That's a bigger city, some more things to see, but there would also be things to see in Herning. And if you could find that specific restaurant, I think that would be something for the Besiktas fans. And other than that, everyone should be free to message me on, I don't know, on X or something else, and I would be sure to look into more specific things they could go after, and maybe also meet up, because I might be going to. I hope I will be going to the match in Herning. I of course also have part of my family is Turkish. My wife is half Turkish. My father-in-law is Turkish and is a great Besiktas fan. He's also played for Besiktas in the 70s, I think. So just to say, I would probably be at the match also, and I really would be looking forward to meet the Besiktas fans, which would be the first time, I guess, they are in Denmark.
So what is that name of your father-in-law?
His name is Haluk Erbüller. I've tried searching him up from previous squads in the Besiktas. I think I managed to do it one time, but I think he played 5 matches or something like that in the 70s, start of 70s, when he was 18, 19, 20, and before his family sent him out and worked in Great Britain, and that's how he ended up in Denmark. So it's not as to say that my father-in-law is some big Besiktas legend or something else. Nobody would recognize him, but of course it was a story that a great story for him to tell his son-in-law, when we first met quite some years ago. Of course, that was something I was very impressed by. But this is not to say that this is some former Besiktas legends. Sorry.
And is he born in Turkey or born in Denmark?
He was born in Istanbul. I actually think the story was that he was part of the academy in Galatasaray, but his neighbor this is just the story he told me, this neighbor was the goalkeeper of Beşiktaş, and he said, you have to play for Beşiktaş, and that's how it ended up. So when I visit them, they live in Bodrum now, when I visit them, the first thing you see when you go in the hall area is a Beşiktaş shirt signed. That's from the season where Atiba was there. One of the seasons Atiba was there, and Tolga Sangin is also on the shirt. So that's also very nice to experience. So it's just nice to experience that authentic Turkish football culture also.
So would you say that you're a closet Beşiktaş fan as well then?
I know that people in Denmark are saying it.
Almost in an accusatory way.
Let me phrase it that way. Let me phrase it. Let me just leave it at that and phrase it that way.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nicklas. As he said, you can find him on X at Nicklas Degn, just like it's written out there, but one word. Anything else you would like to plug, Nicklas? Maybe the podcast or something else?
No, that should be fine. It's all in Danish, so I don't expect anyone to hear it. But
there's Danish Beşiktaş fans too. I'm talking to one right now, apparently.
Yeah, that's true. I mostly broadcast at Mediano, so everybody should check that out. But other than that, I just hope that the Beşiktaş fans going to Denmark is having a great time and will enjoy both the city or the area and Denmark as such. And I expect that everyone would welcome them with open arms. I know that I would.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicklas. And of course, thank you all for watching this episode of the Black Eagles podcast. It was a very detailed, fascinating interview with you, Nicklas. Thank you very much for your time. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know in the comments, by the way, what you expect for the game. Do you think Beşiktaş will be able to eliminate FC Midtjylland, or do you think it is too early in the season to face such a tough opponent? Let us know, and we'll see you soon, probably after the game on the 23rd.